once you've taken the TRX out of the box, the first thing you should always check is just your tensiometers to make sure they're free and there's no problem. And then of course the rollers, just to make sure they're rolling freely and there's nothing occluding them, because that's sometimes the sign, of course, that there's a problem. And of course, if you hear something going on when you're listening to a tape, you'll know that it's always going to be something along the lines of the bearings are stiff, or there's something impeding the tensiometers, stopping them from working. So they're the two things that can mechanically give you issues, but that's with any machine. So you've got to just be mindful that that's a mechanical device, and with all mechanical devices, those things happen. Packed with your TRX, you will receive a pair of hub clamps, or two pairs of hub clamps. One's called the Hubba Hubba, which is this one here. It comes like this just for traveling purposes. Obviously, this bolt is replaced by the actual bolt on the machine itself. So the way that it works is quite simple, just to explain to you. Essentially, you take this, for the first time you use it, you remove this. You make sure you don't lose the washer. You remove the washer. You remove this triangular bit. As you can see underneath, there's a spring. So basically what happens, of course, is you remove that, and this now is replacing, it goes on top of your actual machine itself. Now if you're using plastic reels, that's where you use the stainless steel hub, okay? So it's not using NAB reels. So there's a pair of those that come with the machine as well. Now to assemble the actual Hubba Hubba on your machine, you simply take the first big red bit that you see, and you obviously pop that over the top of this. Then you grab your NAB reel and align it with the spokes and push that down. And then of course if you've got the spring, you put the spring in. If not, it doesn't matter, it works without the spring as well. The idea behind the triangle, is that in this position you can actually pull this off. So you can pull this actual off. But obviously when you're locking it, you want it in this position. There's your lock position. So you can see the spring just helps you move it in another position. We put the washer first that came with it, and then we just screw this puppy here, making sure of course this is the center between the holes, and lock it. So make sure it's just as tight as it goes, and now you can move that. That doesn't move, it's totally locked. So basically that's how the Hubba works. So now if you want to take off the NAB, you unlock it, and then you turn this. As you can see, the spring's pushing it up. You turn it to here. You can lock it there if you want to, or just leave it relatively loose. And then you can pull off the reel and put another reel back on. And of course then undo that. The spring pushes it up. You put it towards where the screws are, and you lock it again. So this is the way the hub works. Now here I'm going to just show you how to thread the tape without too many issues. First across these rollers here, across the rubber, across the heads, across the other rubber. So basically you use your second hand just to sort of thread it through, and then of course over here to the take-up reel, and of course rock and roll. There you go. You'll notice that the tape path goes over the top of this section. This basically pulls the tape away from the heads like it does right now. It's in the retract mode. What that means is that if it goes in rewind or fast forward, it stays there, and it protects the heads from the tape wearing against them. So the whole point of having a retract mode is simply that. It keeps the tape off the heads for rewind and fast forward. Now if you notice here, the tape has two sides. It has a black side, which is the back of the tape, and it has a glossy oxide side, which is, if I show you now, you see the difference. That's the glossy oxide side, and that's the back of the tape. So the back of the tape obviously goes through all this, and the front of the tape, the oxide, is what goes against the heads. So just so that you know the correct obviously that's for modern tape machines. Firstly, of course, you've threaded it through the machine. When you get to this side, basically put the tape through the first hole, hold it against the actual hub itself, make sure that's like that. As I'm holding that, pushing it down, waiting to take it up, and then basically what you've done is tucked it underneath itself. So there you go, there's your tape now ready to go. So just do it a few more times until it sort of holds itself, and then you're ready. Now in the front of your machine there are 4 sets of volume controls basically. The two on this side here is what you see, it says record, and this side says playback. So this side is if your machine's set up for recording. This is for your input levels for recording onto the machine, onto the tape. Normally you have them around, say, halfway. And of course this side is playback. Again, normally you'd have those around just over halfway. And that then gives you the best optimal output level. And of course then you can adjust the channel balance by just simply adjusting the left and the right. So clearly the right and the left. Normally in tape jargon, this is called channel 1, which is left, channel 2, which is right. So basically that's it. Channel 1, which is left, is the actual top part of the head. So if you actually look at the head itself, the head has 2 sections. If I just pull the tape back off that for a second, you see that the head has 2 sections. The top section is channel 1 and the bottom section is channel 2, which is, so channel 1 at the top is left, channel 2 at the bottom is right. So now we're looking at the back of the machine. The back of the machine, of course, the cable in the center here, there's your power cable that just clips in, that's a LEMO. And of course on this side you've got your right and your left outputs. So the outputs are always on the right side, same as the reflecting the playback. When you see playback on the right side of the machine, these are the outputs associated with the playback, and of course your inputs are on the left side. And these of course use the same convention in the professional world, which is you have female inputs and you have male outputs. So that's also to signify which is which. Okay, so remember, here's your record in, and in some machines which are playback only, there's nothing there, just a blank. And of course here are your outputs. Now even though they're XLRs, they can also be RCAs or LEMOs. They are single-ended, they're not balanced, because the machine is actually a single-ended machine. Then we turn on the machine. So the first thing you'll see, of course, is the logo coming up, and then to TRX reel tape recorder. That means everything's working. You'll then see these things bouncing a bit, because basically what's happening is the audio electronics now, of course, are warming up. So always give it a little bit of time. When I say a little bit of time, maybe a minute, just to sort of settle. And then once you've settled, you can turn on your amplifier, like we have here. Press play. And off you go. Now remember, these switches here, this is in record or safe. When it's in safe, you can't record on the machine. So if you're using it for mostly playback, I suggest you leave it in safe. But then do remember, if you want to record, you have to push it back to record. The other switch here is either 15 IPS, in the middle 7.5 and the bottom 30. So here, as you can hear the music coming through now. Now at the front here you have these 2 knobs for playback, so you can adjust up or down the level for each channel. I normally have them in position 1, which is halfway. Now of course stop pulls the tape back off, so of course you can, without touching the volume control, do things like rewind, or of course things like fast forward. So basically all these things are normal like in any other tape machine. So of course now we're doing fast forward, so you'll see there's a speed ratio shown, because clearly this reel is going slower than that reel. And then stop. and of course play. Now always you'll get some tape debris which comes off the tape from time to time. Don't worry, that's normal. That's why you tend to have little brushes, artist brushes, to brush that off. Also, you might see that the tape is slightly higher here on the capstan rollers. It's not a problem. The issue is for that tape to be nice and linear, and the most important thing is how it affects, that goes through the heads. That's the absolute key here. So all these things have to be adjusted to make sure that that tape path is as perfect as possible. And you'll see that there's rollers here, rollers here, rollers here, rollers here. That's important for two things. One is that the student calls them anti-flutter, but I just suggest that what it does is help straighten the tape itself and make sure that the tape is as straight as possible as it's going over the heads. Because if you have no rollers in those positions, what tends to happen is the tape can be a bit skewed, and if that happens, of course, what that means is that it doesn't contact with the head as it should. Now, in the event that you're using plastic rollers, so obviously they don't need an AP hub, they go like that, and then you need just the stainless steel. But I suggest you use like a washer or something, because otherwise that can lock against it and make it difficult and be difficult to remove. What makes this machine quite interesting is that what I've tried to do is built in what I call anti-scrape rollers. So these two rollers on either side, the rollers nearest to the actual reels, they're designed to keep the level of the tape central so it doesn't scrape. When you're using plastic, you'll notice plastic is quite a bit thicker than aluminium, so sometimes what that means is that the actual tape will scrape against the bottom. So in the case of these, you can actually unscrew this. Let me give you a better angle. You can actually unscrew this bolt here, which is an M4 bolt, remove it, and you can then put, obviously where the M4 bolt goes against this, you can put, there's some washers that come with the actual inside your leatherette pouch, and you can put those washers in here, and what they then do is when you bolt them back onto this, they add enough distance so that you avoid the scraping. So in other words, now that's come up a little bit so the actual tape won't scrape. So again, you've got a few washers there so you can play with that, but again, that's worst case. I really don't recommend using plastic reels, to be honest. I think at this level you should be using just metal reels for a lot of reasons. Okay, but basically that's what they're for. They're called the anti-scrape rollers.